Um, I feel that this is a privilege indeed given to me to be able to share to you products or results of my readings, research, studies, trainings attended, and of course, practice in the classroom. As Dr. Torres mentioned earlier on, some of the points that I will be sharing with you today may not be totally new or strange to you, my fellow highly esteemed educators in Silliman, but it pays to walk through some of the principles and guidelines that govern designing assessments. And yesterday, we did talk about principles that govern designing essay tests. I hope you still remember what we talked about yesterday, like what an essay is, when is the best time to give an essay test, and how do we construct essay test items. Now, and then I think one of the questions asked yesterday would lead me to this topic today when I said that there are indeed some competencies that cannot be measured by any pen and paper form of assessment, but by other means or other forms. That is what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to our session on designing performance-based assessment. Okay, I'd like us all to begin with just a thought from one of the most celebrated educators and authors, Alvin Toffler, who once said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. At the end of our session this afternoon, it is hoped that we can all confidently say that I can explain the nature and characteristics of performance-based assessment. I can discuss the process of designing and facilitating performance-based assessment. And I can design performance-based assessments that are aligned with standards and learning targets, that are written in GRASP's form, and third, that are open-ended or differentiated. Okay, so just a quick walk down memory lane. When former President Aquino signed into law RA 10533, or otherwise known as the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, the primary goal or purpose then was not just to add 2 more years to basic education, but as it is stated in one of the provisions of the RA 10533, the state shall create a functional basic education system that will develop productive and responsible citizens equipped with the essential competencies, skills, and values for both lifelong learning and employment. So what does this new law emphasize? Lifelong learning and employment. Now, consequently, the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, along with the Philippine Qualifications Framework and the Commission on Higher Education Memorandum Order number 46, and the global call for transformative education became the precursors of outcomes-based education in the country. And since outcomes-based education is an approach that is evidence-based, where learners search for evidences, for questions that we formulate or we ask, where learners appraise evidence and apply evidence to practice, and very specifically in real life setting. And more than that, where learners evaluate evidence use, OBE then is the educational system that prepares students to meet the highest standards of a particular profession. And so, in simple terms, in the career and life ladder, the basic foundations are basic education, the tertiary education, of course, career and life as the end result. Okay, so now, In as much as the expected outcomes of K to 12 and outcomes-based education are summed up as follows, like to eliminate permanent failure, to eliminate compromised standards, to reduce rote learning, absorption of miscellaneous facts, and slavish adherence to procedural knowledge, to increase students' ability to appreciate and deal with realistic situations, to eliminate tracking, and eventually to produce lifelong learners and globally competitive graduates. The question now should be, who are more accountable to produce these kinds of graduates? In other words, who should be more accountable in preparing the learner to become lifelong learners
teachers and parents,
and globally competitive citizens? Is it the basic education teachers or the tertiary level teachers? Now, to answer that, do you still remember the story of the rabbit and the turtle? Do you still remember who won the race? You still remember who won the race? Many of you would probably say it's the turtle that won the race. But let's find out if indeed it was the turtle that won the race. I'd like us all to watch this for a very few minutes.
Soon finished the race, emerging.
Okay, I understand there was no audio at the first part of the video, so let me play the video one more time. Here it goes.
Once upon a time, a turtle and a rabbit had an argument about who was faster. They decided to settle the argument with a race. The turtle and the rabbit both agreed on a route and started off the race. The rabbit shot ahead and ran briskly for some time. Then, seeing he was far ahead of the turtle, he thought he'd sit under a tree for some time and relax before continuing the race. He sat under the tree and soon fell asleep. The turtle, plodding on, overtook him and soon finished the race, emerging as the undisputed champ. The rabbit woke up and realized that he'd lost the race. The moral of the story is that slow and steady wins the race. This is the version of the story that we've all grown up with. But our version of the story continues. The rabbit was disappointed at losing the race, and he did some thinking. He realized that he'd lost the race only because he had been overconfident, careless, and lax. If he had not taken things for granted, there's no way the turtle could have beaten him. So, he challenged the turtle to another race. The turtle agreed. This time, the rabbit went all out and ran without stopping from start to finish. He won by several miles. The moral of the story? Fast and consistent will always beat the slow and steady. It's good to be slow and steady, but it's better to be fast and reliable. But the story doesn't end here. The turtle did some thinking this time and realized that there's no way he can beat the rabbit in a race the way it was currently formatted. He thought for a while and then challenged the rabbit to another race, but on a slightly different route. The rabbit agreed. The turtle and rabbit started off. In keeping with his self-made commitment to be consistently fast, the rabbit took off and ran at top speed until he came to a broad river. The finishing line was a couple of kilometers on the other side of the river. The rabbit sat there, wondering what to do. In the meantime, the turtle trundled along, got into the river, swam to the opposite bank, continued walking, and finished the race. The moral of the story? First, identify your core competency, and then change the playing field to suit your core competency. The story still hasn't ended. The turtle and rabbit by this time had become pretty good friends, and they did some thinking together. Both last race could have been run much better. So, the turtle and rabbit decided to do the last race again, but to run as a team this time. They started off, and this time the rabbit carried the turtle till the riverbank. There, the turtle took over and swam across with the rabbit on his back. On the opposite bank, the rabbit again carried the turtle, and they reached the finishing line together. Both the turtle and rabbit felt a greater sense of satisfaction than they'd felt earlier. The moral of the story? It's good to be individually brilliant and to have strong core competencies. But unless you're able to work in a team and harness each other's core competencies, you'll always perform below par, because there will always be situations at which you'll do poorly and someone else does well. Teamwork is mainly about situational leadership, letting the person with the relevant core competency for a situation take leadership. And that is the end of the story.
And the moral of the story is, I'd like to repeat what the narrator said, that it is good to be individually brilliant and to have strong core competencies. But unless you're able to work in a team and harness each other's competencies, you'll always perform below par, because whether we like it or not, at some point in our life, there will always be situations where we do poorly and someone else does well. Like the rabbit and the turtle, we run as a team, Siliman. Okay, so the question now is, how do we run together and how do we produce learners, lifelong learners who are globally competitive? Okay, now, in the implementing rules and regulations of the K-12 program, it is clearly stated that pursuant to Section 5 of the Act, DepEd shall formulate and design the details of the enhanced basic education curriculum, and that DepEd shall work with CHED and TESDA to craft harmonized basic, tertiary, and technical vocational education curricula for Filipino graduates to be locally and globally competitive. Thus, lifelong learners who are globally competitive. Okay, so along the way, as we progress in our discussion this afternoon, I'd like us to try to find answers to these questions. How should today's learners be prepared for the 21st century? And second, how does the K-12 curriculum and outcomes-based education prepare Filipino students for life and work? Okay, you know, according to a framework established by the Partnership for 21st Century Learning, today's students will need to be equipped with the 4 C's of lifelong learning in order to meet the challenges of the 21st century workplace. And what are these 4 C's? One of the 4 C's is critical thinker and critical thinking. The next one is where students are good at solving problems. And then there's communication, where students display understanding and they communicate clear ideas. And then there's collaboration, where our learners can really work as a team. And then, of course, at the very heart or the very core of them is creating, where students produce high quality work. Now, I would like to ask, why do you think creating is at the core, is at the bottom? Okay, well, I think it's very obvious simply because before our learners can produce anything, can create anything out of their learning, they need to develop all the other C's first: critical thinking, communicating, and collaborating. But did you know that it was found out that these forces are not enough to produce lifelong learners who are globally competitive? So education researchers and specialists thought about adding three more, and so we now have the so-called seven C's of 21st century, or the 21st century lifelong skills. And what did they add? We have cross-cultural understanding, where students are developed to embrace across diverse ethnic, knowledge, and organizational cultures. And then, of course, there's computing or ICT literacy, which I'd like to believe somehow is already embedded among our learners now. Okay. And then, of course, there's career and learning self-reliance, where students or learners are trained and developed to manage change, lifelong learning, and career redefinition. Okay? And so, only then, only when these seven C's are developed in our learners, when we can develop learners who are ICT competent, who are productive entrepreneurs, who are creative designers, who are holistically fit and healthy, who are responsible and ethical citizens, who are effective communicators and are multiliterate learners. These are the marks, therefore, of global competitiveness, or these are the outcomes for global competitiveness. Now, so it was once said that the successful graduate who is ready for work in the 21st century is the graduate who demonstrates these 21st century skills. And as such, who then will prepare these graduates to be successful? Well, no doubt, evidently, we, the teachers, are the ones who will prepare the graduates by helping them equip themselves with the 21st century skills. Now, since this is our challenge, how will this affect the way teachers do their work? How will this affect the way we approach teaching, especially now as we transition to a new modality of teaching? What changes in curriculum and instruction need to be learned in order to make our students globally competitive? Okay. Now, in order to meet the challenge and demand for lifelong learners and globally competitive graduates, altogether, DepEd, CHED, and even TESDA espouse the idea of a standards-based classroom or a standards-based curriculum. So what is or what are observable in a standards-based curriculum? Well, in a standards-based classroom or curriculum, assessment, and instruction, or CHI, and student learning are explicitly aligned to the standards. That's one. Next, that all students have access to the standards. That's precisely why I think it's a practice that we hand out to our learners copies of our syllabi, or in our case, in the context of junior high school, we unpack the standards and the competencies at the start of every quarter. So all students have access to the standards. And then students produce evidence of learning. Take note, students produce evidence of learning. And so, what role do standards then play in designing a standards-based classroom? I'd like us all to take a look at this design protocol of standards-based classroom or standards-based education. What do you think do standards play in a standards-based education? Okay, as indicated by the arrows, of course, the diagram or this design protocol clearly states that from the standards, which are stipulated in our CMOs or in our curriculum guides, we have the competencies or the intended learning outcomes. And from these competencies or ILOs, we design our assessment. And from assessment, we design our instruction. In simple terms, in a standards-based education, instruction aligns with assessment, assessment aligns with competencies or ILOs, and competencies and ILOs align rather with standards. So that's what we call the design protocol of standards-based education. The next question is, how then do we design our curriculum for a standards-based classroom? This is the standards-based model. It's composed of 3 stages, which I am pretty sure we are all aware about. We've heard pretty much about the backward design, where we begin with the end in mind. And so stage 1 in the 3 stages requires us to identify desired results. Like, what do I want my students to know and be able to do at the end of the quarter or at the end of the semester? This is where we provide them opportunities to gather big ideas or ask essential questions so that they will arrive at enduring understandings. Okay? And then comes stage 2, when we determine acceptable evidence. So if these are the desired results that I have for my learners, how will I make sure that they have acquired the requisite knowledge, skills, and understandings? So that's stage 2, when we determine acceptable evidence. And then comes the 3rd stage, which is planning, learning experiences, and instruction. So this is what we call, again, the backward design, where we begin with stage 1, beginning with the end in mind, and this being the end in mind, we determine acceptable evidence through assessments, and then comes the 3rd stage, which is when we plan learning experiences and instruction. Okay, so that's the standards-based model. Now, next. So what roles then will teachers have to play in a standards-based classroom? There are 3 basic rules that a teacher must espouse. Number 1 is he or she is a designer of learning, where he or she puts together the different elements of the learning plan according to the standards. Now, after the designing comes the next stage, which is again the next role, which is assessor, where the teacher provides feedback regarding student progress and achievement. And then comes our 3rd role as the facilitator of learning, where we guide students in their inquiry and in their transfer. So these are the roles that the teacher must espouse in a standards-based classroom: designer, assessor, and then, of course, facilitator of learning. Now, these being said, how then do we design performance-based assessments that develop lifelong learning and global competitiveness? So again, how do we design performance-based assessments that develop lifelong learning and global competitiveness? Now, to answer that, before we answer that, I'd like us all to give this another thought. Here's a quote from another famous education specialist, Tony Wagner. Oh, if you are seeing something like backward design on the screen now, that's not my doing. I don't know how it got there. Okay, so may I continue anyway? Tony Wagner once said that the world no longer cares about how much you know, but the world cares about what you can do about what you know. And that is a completely different education problem. So, how can students transfer their learning in a way that enables them to become lifelong learners and globally competitive? In simple terms, what sort of performance-based assessments must we design to develop lifelong learners who are globally competitive? To answer that, I'd like to present to you Sheila's case. Sheila, an English teacher, is about to end a unit to find out how faith affects the manner or way that writers from South and West Asian countries write a body of texts. She wants her students to find out how this faith keeps these people strong and firm in their beliefs amidst pressures from the world. Since it is time for the students to do a performance task, she is considering having her students do one of the following. Will it be A, make a comic strip about the various text types? Sounds very engaging. Students love doing this. Or is it B, formulate a list of coping mechanisms employed by the South and West Asian countries amidst pressures of the world? Or is it C, compose a rap song expressing how faith keeps these people strong? Kids love to rap. Or is it D, write and deliver a journalistic text focusing on the beliefs of South and West Asian countries in handling challenging situations? Is it A, B, C, or D? Now, in the K-12 or OBE program, which of the above will Sheila have the students do as evidence of learning? Is it A, B, C, or D? Let's think about that. Meanwhile, let's take a look at another case. This time, let's talk about Leah, a science teacher. She's about to end the unit on scientific processes. Since it is time for the students to do a performance task, she is considering doing one of the following again. A, make a comic strip again about the steps of scientific method. B, design an experiment that applies the processes of a scientific investigation. Is it C, compose a rap song to help students identify the scientific processes? That's possible, that's doable. Or is it D, make a situational analysis to understand and examine closely the different steps of the scientific method? Again, in the context of K-12 or outcomes-based education, which of the above will Leah have the students do as evidence of learning? A, B, C, or D? While we are still probably thinking, I'd like to bring to our attention that a performance task or a performance-based assessment is a benchmark of transfer of learning, where students are expected to produce products and or performances as evidence that they can transfer or use their learning in real life situations. Okay, again, students are expected to produce products or do performance tasks as evidence that they can transfer or use their learning in real life situations. Now, before we proceed, what do you think is the difference between transfer and application? Or you think they are synonymous? Because probably for teachers like me who have been in the field for some ages now, we would probably be more familiar with the term application of learning rather than transfer of learning. But are they too similar? Are they synonymous? So that's a very important question that we need to find out to answer. When you engage your learners in something like this in our classes, whether face-to-face or online, is this transfer or application of learning? How about when students can solve this mathematical problem, for instance, or this is physics, if I'm not mistaken, okay? If they can solve this problem, do you think they have performed application of learning or transfer of learning? Or how about this one? When students engage in designing a prototype of something, is this transfer or application of learning? Now, transfer or application is defined as something that involves practice. There is practice involved, but not always responding to real life situations. But transfer involves both practice and a response to real world concerns for a particular audience. That is why in the context of K-12 and OBE, I think it's a more appropriate term, transfer is a more appropriate or a more fitting term to use, because students should not just be able to apply learning, but apply this learning and at the same time as a response to a real world concern and for a real world audience. So that's the difference between transfer and application. So if we now go back to Sheila's case, what will she ask her students to do now? Again, in the context of K-12 and OBE, which of the above would Sheila have the students do as evidence of learning? I guess you will all go for letter D. Because letter D, where students write and deliver a journalistic text, focusing on the beliefs of South and West Asian countries in handling challenging situations, puts the students in a real life situation. It's letter D that puts the students in real life situation. They don't just apply, but they transfer learning to address a real life situation. Now, how about Leah's case, the science teacher? Will she ask her students to option A, B, C, or D? Again, in the context of K-12 and OBE, which of the above will Leah have students do as evidence of learning? Or which of these situations will put students in real life situation? Okay, although the other details are not there, but it should be letter B rather, when students are made to design an experiment that applies the processes of a scientific investigation. Maybe I have missed that out, to address a real life situation. Okay, so that's what clearly transfer of learning is as against application of learning. Very sure we all would not want to produce learners or graduates who conduct themselves this way in a job interview, for instance. I see you did well at school, but real world skills, what real world skills do you have? Tests. I can take tests. So again, students must be able to transfer learning in real life and for a real world audience, real life situations with real world audience. Okay, it's not just that they are able to take tests, that they become globally competitive or lifelong learners. Okay, and so what then are the characteristics of a performance task that prepares learners to transfer learning and become lifelong learners and globally competitive? Number one, since we've been talking about standards-based curriculum, a good performance task must be standards-based. Like we design a performance task or standards or a performance-based assessment based on standards. Simply put, it must be aligned, or a performance task must be aligned with competencies and standards. Now, allow me to share to you what we do in our context in junior high school. We take a look at performance standards of every quarter. And for example, the performance standard says the learner transfers learning by composing a variety of journalistic texts, the contents of which may be used in composing and delivering a memorized oral speech. So this is found in the curriculum guide of DepEd, which we adopt, okay? And we can make some tweaks, of course, okay? Now, it is from the performance standards that we design a transfer goal. How do we do that? We just exact the most important or the most significant or the most encompassing among all the verbs in the standards. And we identify the product, or we look for a noun that can become the product to be submitted or to be performed on. And then, of course, we add one thing that is not mentioned in the standards, and that's the real world purpose. So that's the formula. So that if this again is the performance standard, we can have something for a transfer goal. We can have something like the students on their own and in the long run will be able to compose a variety of journalistic texts and deliver them orally to share the South and West Asian beliefs on how they cope amidst all the socio-cultural challenges that have come their way. Okay, so going back, sorry. So what's the verb, the most encompassing verb? Or there are two in this case. We have compose, and deliver. Deliver what? So they will compose what? A variety of journalistic text that becomes the product. Why is that so? To share the South and West Asian beliefs on how they cope amidst all socio-cultural challenges that have come their way. So a good performance task, again, must be aligned with standards. And so from this performance standard found in the first box comes the transfer goal found in the second box. And it is from the transfer goal that we now can design the performance task, which I'm going to give to you in details in a bit, because I should now talk about the second characteristic of a good performance task. What makes it good again? When it can prepare learners to become lifelong learners or globally competitive, because they are equipped with the 7 C's. Now, a performance task must be written in GRASP's format. Now, I believe that this is never new to you, GRASPs, when we design a performance task, especially if we have colleagues here who are in the senior high school, you know these things, sirs and ma'ams. So a good performance task must be written in GRASP's format, where G stands for goal. What is the goal of the performance task? R is for role. What role must students play in this performance task? Okay, and that should never be the role of another student, okay? But that should be the role of someone in the real world outside, okay? Audience, who would be the target audience? And again, this should be a real world audience. And then S is for situation. What's going on? What's the occasion? What's happening? What's the situation? Okay. And then what's the product or performance the product to submit or the performance to do? And then the last S means standards. Okay, I'm going to explain that a bit in a while. So here is an example. Remember that transfer goal I mentioned earlier on, which was derived from the performance standard? So here is a sample of a performance task that can be designed from that transfer goal and from that performance standards in GRASP's format. Allow me to read. The Southwest Asian region, particularly India, Iran, Lebanon, and Middle East, is currently in conflict due to the differences in their religious practices. As a member of a TV news team, you are tasked to write and deliver a 5-minute live news broadcast to be featured in the gathering of the South and West Asian youth delegates, following the theme, Mending Walls of Religious and Social Differences. This summit aims to present concrete solutions to address the conflicts in the region. Your news report must consider the following standards. For the written aspect of the written product, content, appeal to readers, organization, validity of sources. For the delivery, appeal to audience, appropriate stance and behavior and use of speech techniques, as these are all expected to have been developed and mastered within the quarter. Okay, and so what's the goal? All right, it's there. I think my prompter is quick to give that to you. The goal is this summit aims to present concrete solutions to address the conflicts in the region. So you see, it's the goal that puts the learners in a real life setting, in a real world situation. Okay, next, what's the role of learners? You're right, they are members of a TV news team. What about the audience? The target audience, okay, the delegates to the South and West Asian youth gathering. And then what's the situation? Well, it's there that the Southwest Asian region, particularly these countries and the Middle East, is currently in conflict due to the differences in their religious practices. Now, what are they expected to do, to submit, to do? Okay, to write and deliver a 5-minute live news broadcast to be featured in the gathering. Okay, And the last S in GRASP is the standards, meaning the basis for evaluating and scoring the task. So it's mentioned there, the following standards. And where do we get these standards? In the context of K-12 teaching and in the context of junior high school level. These are also mentioned or derived from the standards, the performance standards of the quarter. Thus, this example of a performance task is not only designed in GRASP's format, but it is also aligned with standards. Okay, I hope I have made this clear. But here's another example of a performance task. The local government unit, or LGU, conducted an assessment on the condition of the ecosystems in your community. It was found out that the populations of certain organisms are declining due to deconstruction of habitats and improper waste disposal. As a community organizer, a graphic or designer, or a blogger of a non-government organization that focuses on environmental protection or that advocates for environmental protection, you are asked to create and present a written plan or an infographics or a blog to the residents of the barangay. The output will be evaluated based on the following criteria: content, relevance, feasibility, and presentation. Now, let's find out if this performance task is designed in GRASP's format. What's the goal? All right, you may have found it already. The goal is to focus or to advocate for environmental protection. The highlight should include protection there in that case. What's the role of the students? What real-world role do we assign the learners to assume in this performance task? All right, it is there. Members, or as you can see now, they are given options. They may want to play the role of a community organizer, a graphic designer, or a blogger for a non-government organization. So the audience, well, a real-world audience, the residents of their barangay. And then what's the situation? Populations of certain organisms are declining due to destruction of habitats and improper waste disposal. And then what's the product? If the learners opt to play the role of a community organizer, then they might want to design a written plan. Or a graphic designer, an infographics. Or for the blogger, they may create a blog. So those are the expected products. So what about the standards? Content, relevance, visibility, and presentation. So clearly, this is a simple performance task for grade 7 or 8 or so that is designed in GRASP's format. That places them in a real-world situation, in a real-world role, and in a real-world audience, thereby giving them the opportunity to transfer learning, okay? To transfer, not only apply, but transfer learning, okay? And so, moving on, here's another example. I'll just be making this quick. I'd like to thank my fellow teacher, Jaffna Amaro, for lending me this example. Here's a Math 10 performance task. Your company is launching a campaign to maximize the available space of the different offices. To save space, each office has to come up with multi-purpose boxes to be used in their respective offices. Your department head assigns your team to create these boxes as your entry in the said campaign. You're encouraged to use recycled materials in creating these boxes. What's the goal? So a performance task may also be designed this way, where the elements for GRASPs are already singled out. Goal, to practice maximizing available space. That's something that learners should be prepared to do in real life later on. To practice maximizing available space. Role, designer and creator of multi-purpose boxes. Audience, creative design department of Save the Space campaign of the company. The situation, I mentioned that earlier on, The company is launching a campaign to maximize the available space of the different offices. And to save space, each office has to come up with multi-purpose boxes to be used in their respective offices, and so on. The product, of course, would be the multi-purpose boxes. And the standards from the mathematics teachers list of standards: quality of construction, effort and creativity, application of the concepts of quadratic equation in problem solving, and accuracy of computation. So this is another example of a performance task that is designed in GRASP's format. Okay, so again, what makes a good performance task? Number one is aligned with standards. Number two is designed in GRASP's format. The third and last one for today is a performance task must be open-ended, where there is freedom for learners to express learning in appropriate ways. I am pretty sure that you have heard already about differentiated assessment, and it is defined as the way by which teachers modify and match assessment with the varied characteristics or profiles of students in order to meet the students' individual needs, thereby enhancing their learning and boosting their ability to show what they have learned. And did you know that one practical way of differentiating performance tasks is the use of GRASPs, okay? Where learners again could be given options regarding the audience or the role or the products, just like I mentioned or demonstrated earlier on. Remember the example, the blogger, the community organizer? Okay, that's an example of how we can possibly differentiate performance tasks using the GRASPs format. Okay, so again, as long as the outcome is aligned with the expected skill, again, I must underscore this. Differentiation may be done as long as the outcome is aligned with the expected skill or a demonstration of mastery of the same standards and competencies. But of course, the following, according to this source found at the bottom of your screen, are basic strategies for differentiating. We can do differentiating in terms of content or process or product, and according to students' readiness, interest, and learner profile. Now, we will not have the liberty of time to discuss all of these, but based on practice or experience, we can differentiate products or performance tasks in terms of content by giving the students an opportunity to use varied presentation methods, okay, according to students' readiness. Or perhaps we can have them come up with their own choice of activities for as long as the content is not compromised. And then we can have them choose their own demonstration of content, whether audio or visual presentation of the content, for as long as the content again is not compromised. Okay, so that's one way of using differentiation with content. For process, different learning activities focused on the same goal, okay, however they do it, for as long as they are geared towards a common goal or same goal, allow students to specialize in an area of interest, again, for as long as they are towards the same goal, provide students with numerous options for an activity, again, for as long as they're geared towards the same goal. Or when it comes to product, we may also differentiate products for as long as these are aligned to skills, for as long as products are relevant to the personal interest of the learners, and that again, they are aligned to the skills, no problem. And then, in terms of learner profile, products take the following into consideration: MI or multiple intelligences, learning style, gender, and culture. But very specifically, here's another example rather. So I thought I would be next to my next slide already, but here's just one more example. Let's consider a health standard that calls for a basic understanding of balanced diet. Let's say the standard mentions about basic understanding of balanced diet. Now, evidence of this understanding could be obtained by having students, of course, explain the concept of balanced diet, like present examples of balanced and unbalanced meals, and list health problems that might result from a nutritionally imbalanced diet. Such evidence can be collected from our learners through writing, right? But writing, but this might affect the other learners' way of expressing their mastery of the content of balanced diet. Okay, so again, such evidence could be collected in writing, but this requirement might be inappropriate for a learner with dysgraphia or a handwriting difficulty, or an ESL student with limited skills in written English. Now, indeed, some students' difficulty with writing could cause the teacher to incorrectly infer that they do not understand the concept of balanced diet. However, especially again for students who are having challenges with writing, however, if students are offered varied manners of response, such as maybe creating a picture book or doing an illustration, the teacher can obtain a more valid measure of their understanding. Okay? But how do I normally do differentiation in the context of teaching my subject? Okay? So here's a template that I would like to share with you. So remember, the transfer goal is like a statement of what the performance task is all about. And this is derived from the standards. Remember, characteristic number 1, aligned with standards. Number 2, grasps. So look, role 1, role 2, role 3, and role 4 has each a respective product. Role 1, product 1. Role 2, product 2, and so on. Okay? But it will be all throughout the same audience, the same situation, the same standards, the same transfer goal, the same skills expected, the same mastery, the same standards is expected. Okay? So how is this translated into an example? Here, the transfer goal says, students on their own and in the long run will effectively share a narrative of their personal experiences that communicate their identity using the appropriate strategies and language functions. Here's a situation. As one of the Philippine Youth Delegation, or one of the members or one of the delegates in the International Leaders Summit, spearheaded by the International Youth Commission, or IYC, you are tasked to narrate one significant episode in your life which reveals your identity as a Filipino. Now, in the context of differentiation, I can have the students do differentiation in terms of roles or products. They may want to be a blogger, where the expected product is an online blog of a personal experience. They might want to be a vlogger, where they're expected to come up with a video blog of a personal experience using ICT. They may want to be a story writer who not only writes a narration of a personal experience, but delivers it before the audience, or a storyteller, a spoken narration sharing or a sharing of a personal experience is also to be written and delivered orally. So take note that whether it is a blog or a video, an online blog or a video blog, or a written narration or a spoken narration of a personal experience, all these 4 products align with the transfer goal that says effectively share a narrative of their personal experiences that communicate their identity using the appropriate strategies and language functions. Whether they assume the role of a blogger, a vlogger, a story writer, or a storyteller, they're all expected to write and share a narrative. Okay? And then the same standards will be used in assessing or scoring their output. Your story must reflect a theme, present elements of description, and follow organization. writing convention and technique. Your presentation will be scored based on your introduction and closure, and then delivery and impact. So here, this is just one sample of how differentiation can be done in the classroom. Okay? And then moving on, we're almost there. We're almost done for this afternoon's sharing. So going back, so how can students transfer their learning in a way that enables them to become lifelong learners and globally competitive? So again, they need to be prepared before they are sent out to the world outside, before they are to transfer their learning in real world situations, real world roles, real world audiences, or audience rather, before a real world audience. And that's when we design performance tasks that are aligned with standards, that are designed in grasps format, and that can be differentiated at the same time. Okay, so always remember the three characteristics. Okay, and so with that, we go back to what Tony Wagner mentioned earlier on at the start of our session, that again, the world no longer cares about how much you know, but the world cares about what you can do about what you know. And I hope that from now on, Tony Wagner will no longer say that this is a completely different education problem. And then, remember, in an effective classroom, students should not only know what they're doing, they should also know why and how. Daghang salamat ug maayong hapon Siliman. God bless you. Hello, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Ren. That was very meaningful. And of course, thank you for, especially for giving us an idea about 4 and 7 C's. And at the same time, thank you for giving us the characteristics of a good performance task to be delivered in an online setting. And of
My
course,
pleasure.
okay, pricking up our ears today. Indeed, everything was very informative and edifying. This will really help us a lot of applying to an online distance learning. A penny of your thought is helpful to an upcoming online class. With that, both of you with Dr. Biola deserves to be congratulated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and now after listening to both speakers, let us now proceed with our open forum. This time, our speakers are very willing to answer our different type of questions regarding the topic. And of course, the attendees can forward your questions via chat or just by raising your hand here in Zoom.
John.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I am reading something here from Mom Florenda Kabatit. I would like to apologize. I didn't notice it. I was so engrossed with my discussion along the way that I didn't notice. She messaged me something like, "Sir, please move your box so it will not cover the slides." My apologies for that. I wasn't aware of that anymore, ma'am. I'll do better next time, Mom Kabati. Mom Kabati. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's good, sir. Okay, we'll check if there are
Questions?
here, and then attendees who were raising their hands. So I am currently monitoring our attendees if there are already constructed questions for them to be asked by our speakers this afternoon. Anyone?
Maybe they're feeling cold, sir.
Yeah,
Right now.
exactly, because of the weather.
Hi, Ma'am Biola.
Hi, sir.
How's the weather out there, ma'am?
Kuan, kanang mas tugnog yun dito sa Bukidnon, sir.
I know that.
Pero pwede na rin. It's good enough.
Yes, ma'am.
Allow me,
Yes,
allow
sir.
me, since we are waiting for the questions of our attendees, allow me to thank the people here for giving us a good insights and outputs on both speakers, and they deserve to be acknowledged, right? So according to Mom Florenda here, the topics are so relevant with the changes in the curriculum and especially in the modalities. So it was indeed a very fruitful
Thank you.
sharing of your experiences regarding on the topic for both of you.
Thank you,
So,
Dr. Kabatit, for that. Thank you, ma'am.
okay, we'll see here if there are people who raise their hands, and we'll just wait for a minute if there are.
I think there's one.
Okay, here again a question coming from Ma'am Florenda. In nursing, we have a lot of performances to do, right? So with the change in modalities, what do you suggest with you? Anyone can answer?
That's for you. That's for you, Sir Caballo.
Okay, yeah. So, the question coming from Ma'am Kabatit is that with the change of modality, what do you suggest we do with performance tasks? Okay. Um, I must admit that it may be very difficult for now to speak about how we can possibly make the adjustments because we are just about to start. But I think, ma'am, one thing is for sure that when we design our performance tasks, we do not compromise things like these must be aligned to standards. We must not also compromise that we design performance tasks in such a way that we provide our learners with an opportunity not only to apply learning but transfer learning. But in the case, for example, of how they can do this, considering the limitation now of mobility of our learners, especially with nursing, I can't imagine, actually, in all honesty, ma'am, how they can do performance tasks in their in their field, that they really need to go to the to clinics or to health centers or to hospitals and do their thing. Well, I believe there are also virtual activities that we can provide to our nursing students. And I think I must really admit that for now, it may be very challenging really in our part on how we can transition from the usual format to a new format that fits the new modality now that we are about to embrace. Okay, maybe Ma'am Viola has something to add to that, considering that this is something to do about the new modality, ma'am, of how we can do assessments in the new modality.
Maybe that would be for the asynchronous assessment, definitely. We assign students to do those tasks, but asynchronously for that matter.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And this is also when we can do differentiation with the limitations now. I think we can really try out using differentiation in our performance task. And Ma'am Kabatit also mentioned here something. Thanks, sir. Can we ask you to look at our checklists and how we can improve them to suit online learning? I would love to do that, ma'am. And please let know, ma'am, that our discussion on performance tasks did not end today. Because as Doc Viola also gives me the floor tomorrow and on to Thursday and Friday, I will talk more about other features of a performance task designed in such a way that we develop learners who are lifelong learners and who are globally competitive. Allow me to walk you through more features about a performance task. And maybe along the way, I can suggest, maybe starting tomorrow, I can suggest some alternatives in this new modality, for this new modality.
Okay, so thanks for that, sir. We have here another set of questions from Dr. Lily Bautista. here, sir, what do you think about a common tendency of students with initiative and leadership qualities to gain more from performance tasks compared to the students who are not too serious about their studies, especially in the basic ed level? How can teachers monitor true student performance?
All right. So the question actually basically is how can teachers monitor true student performance? Well, I must also admit, ma'am, that even in the junior high school level, we do have students who are non-performing. Even as we design tasks that are really engaging and that are really meaningful and relevant to the curriculum, there are really a few who cannot just be motivated to perform. But to address that and to make sure that students can really perform well, there's this thing called scaffolding for transfer. So along the way, like in every quarter, for instance, there are about 8 weeks in the context of junior high school. So periodically along the way, we do give out activities that will also enable us teachers, ma'am, to monitor progress in what they are about, in what they are going to do at the end of the quarter. So that's what we call um, scaffolds of transfer or scaffolds for transfer. And I'm going to talk more about this on Thursday, actually, ma'am. So, and then on Friday, I'll even talk more about performance tasks and how do we design rubrics for performance tasks. So, yes, that really is true that there are learners who are too serious, but there are others who are not too serious. But based on practice or based on experience, ma'am, I think one help that we can give to ourselves and to our learners is to design as well scaffolds for transfer, which again I'm going to walk you through in details on Thursday. Hope you can join us also then, ma'am. That's Ma'am Lily, right?
Okay, so I think and I believe that everyone are very knowledgeable enough on the topic which was given to both speakers because they don't have questions anymore on the topic. Okay, so I think here as we go along through this, I think we have some people here raising their hands for one more time. Okay. I think Ma'am Nadia Abisamis has question.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for that informative talk. I just want to ask about the performance task.
Yes.
One of the things I do at the tertiary level, especially for our juniors, sophomores, juniors, is I give them an option to work either individually or as a group because
Yes,
you
ma'am.
know we have to respect those who are introverts or just perform better alone. Is that
Yes, ma'am.
okay at the tertiary level? That I don't force a group kind of performance task all the time. I have other, say, tasks where they work as groups, but for certain things, I allow them to choose. Is that fine?
That's perfectly fine, ma'am. As a matter of fact, while collaboration is one of the 7 C's that we must develop among our learners, and I will talk about these 7 C's collaboration of one of which tomorrow as we continue. But you are doing it perfectly fine. That we cannot just force collaboration all the time, because sometimes there really are problems that come along the way, especially if when we ask students to collaborate and we are not there to supervise or to monitor, especially in the case of our junior high school students, found that they really need a lot of supervision and monitoring. But again, you are doing it perfectly fine. There are tasks that can be done individually or collaboratively. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
too, ma'am.
you for that, Ma'am Abisamis. If you don't have any more questions, then that means it was indeed a very fruitful discussion to every one of us this afternoon. At this moment, we prepared here a certificate of participation to our attendees. Okay, allow me to read the citation. Telemann University presents this certificate of participation to all attendees for his or her participation during the webinar series on student assessment with the topics designing multiple choice question to test higher order thinking and designing performance-based assessment, which was held on July 21st, 2020 via Zoom online, signed our very own Director Office of the Instruction, Dr. Viola Rose Artares. Okay, so to bring something to a successful discussion or conclusion, designing multiple choice question and designing performance-based assessment, teacher must identify their goals, design the scenario, and develop the learning plan. That is why we need to interact with these highly targeted learning bursts. And we had a whale of time this afternoon seeing our attendees via Zoom. But before we go, let me announce that we must submit our evaluation after this session, which will automatically appear on screen after this webinar. Make sure to have this so that you can complete your participation in this webinar and we could send your certificates. And here on screen, we have here a post-webinar evaluation survey. You can actually have this one.
Hi, sir. Sir,
Yes.
some people are asking whether they could view this again. Like they could also view the sessions yesterday because they were unable to attend for some reason. So if ever someone would like to view that, how can that be done, please?
Okay, we will be giving the link of the webinar, which was be started yesterday and of course today, later after this session.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so if you have another time to witness a various topic for us to prepare ourselves on online distance learning, again, I'll invite everyone tomorrow. We will ascertain another topic with the same speaker about fostering 21st century skills through performance assessment and another tips and designing true or false question. Okay, so we hope to see you again. This has been your moderator, John Saint Palama. Thank you and good afternoon.